When we talk about race and social equity, why does it feel like governments sometimes get, well, nervous? What does that even mean? And more importantly, how do we get past that nervousness to make some real, meaningful change? Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful way of thinking about this.
And this quote from Nelson Mandela it hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's the perfect way to frame this conversation. It tells us, yeah, this work is tough. It's going to feel impossible sometimes, but it also reminds us that progress is absolutely within our reach. So let's keep that in mind as we jump in.
All right, so welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5340. We're going to be breaking down some of the key readings from Chapter 11 of the text, Race and Social Equity, a Nervous Area of Government. Think of this as a quick session to pull out the big ideas and actionable principles that can help any organization move from anxiety to real action.
So first things first, what are we even talking about here? What exactly is this nervous area? Let's get a solid definition down.
Okay, so here it is. The nervous area of government is all about how a public organization deals with justice in these really sensitive, emotionally charged topics. The nervous part is pretty obvious, right? These subjects carry so much emotional and historical weight. But the of government part is just as important. Public agencies are supposed to serve everybody, and their own history in these areas is, well, it's complicated.
The book gives this fantastic analogy that I think makes it all crystal clear. Ignoring racial inequity is just like ignoring a cavity in your tooth. I mean, nobody wants to go to the dentist, right? Avoiding it feels way easier in the moment. But we all know that cavity doesn't just magically disappear. It just gets bigger and deeper and way more painful to deal with down the road. It's a perfect illustration of why just hoping the problem goes away is not a strategy.
So if we know avoiding the problem only makes it worse, what finally gives government the push it needs to finally make that dentist appointment? Let's look at the pressures that actually force them to take action.
And you can't talk about this without talking about history. This is so crucial. The inequities we see today are not some random accident. They are often a direct result of a legal history of discrimination in things like housing, education, you name it. And look, this isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's simply an empirical fact. We have to understand that history to have any hope of creating effective policies today. It's our roadmap of what not to do.
A lot of the time, that push to act actually comes from the outside, and it usually falls into one of four buckets. You've got political pressure from elected officials. You have legal triggers like a lawsuit. There are economic reasons, believe it or not, where it just costs too much to maintain the status quo. And then there's moral pressure, a shift in what society says is right. And these aren't separate things. Usually it's a mix of all four that finally gets the ball rolling.
Okay, so we've got the what and the why, but what about the how? How does real change actually start happening inside an organization? Well, it absolutely has to start at the top. And that leads us to this really powerful three-part strategy. It's a 1-2-3 punch. First, senior leadership has to be all in. They have to champion this stuff because they're the ones who set the tone and culture. Second, the organization itself has to officially make equity work part of the job, not some extra credit project. And third, you've got to give people the tools to do the work. You need clear policies and practices so people on the front lines feel empowered.
Now, to really get what that extending boundaries part means, you have to understand this difference. Every job has public boundaries. That's your official job description, right? But then there are the real boundaries. And that's what you feel you can actually do without getting a slap on the wrist. For progress to happen, the organization has to consciously push those real boundaries out, so employees feel safe and encouraged to tackle equity work.
Now, big organizational change is key, but let's be real, organizations are made up of people. So this doesn't happen without individuals. Let's zoom in on the role each and every public servant plays in this.
And this brings us to a huge point. How you, as an individual, talk about or maybe don't talk about race at work has a direct, tangible impact. Your personal communication style can either help push things forward or keep everything stuck right where it is.
And we can actually see a few common strategies people use. Some, like just straight-up avoidance or saying you're colorblind, actually stop progress in its tracks. Others, like cultural pluralism, where you actually acknowledge and value group differences, that's what opens the door to productive conversations and real change. Just thinking about which one of these is your default, that's a really powerful first step.
So what's the right mindset to bring to this work? It really boils down to two things. First, you have to be race conscious.
We can't fix inequities based on race if we pretend race doesn't exist. It just doesn't work. And second, be accountable. You have to tie equity goals to the agency's actual mission, and then you have to measure them. Because at the end of the day, what gets measured is what gets done.
I know, after all this, it can feel like a massive, daunting task. But the final and maybe the most important message here is this. This work is definitely hard, but progress is 100% possible.
And this isn't just some academic theory. We have real-world proof that this stuff works. You can look at the city of Seattle and its big initiative, or the state of Wisconsin, which dug into disparities in its welfare system, all the way up to the federal level with the EPA's work on environmental justice. Change is happening. It's being done.
And that brings us right back to where we started. This whole mission of building a more just, more equitable society through public service, it can feel completely impossible. But as those examples show, and as Nelson Mandela understood so deeply, it only seems that way until you actually get it done.
So, I'll leave our study group with this to chew on. What's a nervous area in your own life? Your work, your community? And thinking about everything we just talked about, what's the first, tiniest, but most intentional step you could take to start addressing it? Thanks for digging into this with me today.